The steel vault stood like a tomb in Vincent Romano's office, a blood stain still visible where the last man collapsed. 5 years, 17 corpses, 0 survivors. Rain hammered the windows as Vincent gestured toward it, hand resting near his gun. "Crack it," he whispered. 100 million inside. Fail, and you join the others. His men laughed, circling like wolves. But the girl in the doorway didn't flinch. Clothes torn, shoes taped together, yet her hands were steady. Too steady. She reached into her pocket, something small, hidden. Vincent's jaw tightened. He'd seen those eyes before. Somewhere. She stepped forward, and for the first time in 20 years, the man who controlled death felt his pulse spike. What she whispered next changed everything. But to understand why those 3 words shattered a 20-year empire, we need to go back 72 hours to the night she lost the only person who ever protected her. 72 hours earlier, she had a name people whispered with love, not fear. Kira Thompson, 10 years old. A girl who should have been worrying about math homework and weekend sleepovers, not whether she'd eat that night. Chicago's South Side didn't care about childhood. The streets raised you fast or buried you faster. Kira learned early that survival wasn't about strength, it was about paying attention when everyone else looked away. Her brother, Marcus, was the only shield she ever had. 16 years old, working 3 jobs to keep them off the streets after their mother disappeared into the needle and their father into a courtroom. He'd tuck her into a sleeping bag at the shelter every night, promise her things would get better, then vanish into the darkness to do things he'd never speak about. She never asked. She already knew. 3 nights ago, Marcus came home with blood on his knuckles and terror in his eyes. He knelt beside her, hands shaking as he pressed something small and cold into her palm, a single key. "If anything happens to me," he whispered, "you take this to Vincent Romano. You tell him exactly 3 words. The debt's paid. Nothing else. You understand?" She nodded, throat too tight to speak. He kissed her forehead. "You're smarter than all of us, Kira. Don't ever forget that." 2 hours later, Marcus was gone. Not missing. Gone. The kind of gone where nobody asks questions because they already know the answers end in rivers and unmarked graves. Kira stood outside the Romano estate now, rain soaking through her jacket, that key burning against her ribs like a promise she couldn't break. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. She didn't know what the key opened. Didn't know why Vincent Romano, a name that made grown men cross the street, would care about 3 words from a dead boy's sister. But she knew one thing Marcus taught her. The world didn't give you second chances. You took them, or you died waiting. So, when those iron gates swung open, and armed men led her through marble halls that smelled like cigars and old blood, Kira Thompson made a choice. She stopped being afraid. And that's when everything changed. The girl who walked into Vincent Romano's office carried everything she owned in a backpack that barely closed. Kira Thompson had never known comfort, never known safety, never known what it felt like to go to bed without wondering if tomorrow would be the day everything fell apart. Her childhood was a series of rooms that never felt like home. Shelters where you slept with one eye open, your shoes tucked under your pillow because someone would steal them if you didn't. Apartments where the heat got shut off in January and you learned to sleep in every piece of clothing you owned. She remembered her mother's face only in fragments now, a smile before the addiction, hands that used to braid her hair, a voice that sang lullabies in a language Kira never learned. Then the slow disappearance. The empty eyes. The mornings she'd wake to find her mother gone, for days, then weeks, then forever. Her father lasted longer, but not by much. He tried. She'd give him that. Worked construction until an injury took his knee, then his job, then his hope. The desperation turned him stupid. He borrowed money from men who didn't forgive debt. They came for him on a Tuesday. Kira was 7, hiding under the kitchen table, watching boots she'd never forget circle her father like sharks. She didn't hear the words, only the tone calm, polite, final. He left with them, never came back. That's when Marcus became everything. Brother, father, mother, hope. He was barely 13, but he carried them both. Found her food when there was none. Taught her to read in public library corners. Showed her how to spot danger 3 blocks away just by watching how people walked. But most importantly, Marcus taught her to think. Strength ain't about fists, Kira, he'd say, tapping her forehead. It's about this. You outsmart them. You outthink them. You survive when they think you're already dead. She absorbed everything, watched him negotiate with landlords, memorized how he talked to cops without saying anything that mattered, studied the way he read rooms before entering them. At 8 years old, she could pick a lock faster than most adults. Not because she was criminal, because locked doors meant trapped, and trapped meant dead. At 9, she'd memorized every route out of their neighborhood, every alley, every fire escape, every place to hide if the wrong people came looking. At 10, she could tell if someone was lying just by watching their hands. School barely mattered. She attended when she could, absorbed information like oxygen. But her real education happened in shelters and street corners. The women there taught her things classrooms never would. How to make yourself invisible when men looked too long. How to know which offers of help were genuine and which were traps. How to survive on nothing and still wake up ready to fight another day. She had no friends her age. How could she? What would she talk about? Their problems were homework and crushes. Hers were hunger and staying alive. But she didn't feel sorry for herself. Self-pity was a luxury for people who had time to waste. Instead, she watched, learned, adapted. She noticed patterns everywhere, the way certain cars circled their block on Fridays, the rhythm of police patrols, which stores wouldn't chase you for stealing bread, which ones called cops before you reached the door. Her mind worked differently than others. She saw systems, connections, vulnerabilities. A puzzle wasn't frustrating, it was interesting. A lock wasn't an obstacle, it was a conversation. Marcus noticed. You're going to be something special, Kira, he'd tell her. Smarter than me, stronger than me. You just got to survive long enough to use it. She believed him, right up until the night he came home bleeding. He wouldn't say what happened, wouldn't tell her whose blood was on his shirt, or why his phone kept buzzing with numbers he wouldn't answer. He just held her tighter than usual, told her he loved her, and made her memorize those 3 words. The debt's paid. She didn't understand then, didn't know Marcus had gotten involved with people who dealt in currencies darker than money. Didn't know he'd traded pieces of his soul to keep her fed, clothed, alive. All she knew was that when he disappeared, the city swallowed him whole and didn't even pretend to look. The police took her statement with bored eyes. Runaway, they wrote down, despite her screaming that Marcus would never leave her. Happens all the time. The shelter counselors tried to be kind, but kindness without action is just noise. They offered her therapy she didn't have time for, suggestions she couldn't afford, hope that felt like lying. So Kira stopped asking for help. She took that key, those 3 words, and did what Marcus taught her. She thought her way through the impossible. Vincent Romano's name wasn't hard to find. Everyone knew it, whispered it, feared it. He was the kind of powerful that didn't need to prove itself. People obeyed or they vanished. Simple mathematics. Getting to him was harder. His estate had walls, guards, cameras, gates that didn't open for little girls with dirty shoes and desperate eyes. But Kira didn't need the gates to open. She just needed to be interesting enough that someone would carry word of her to the man himself. So she stood in the rain outside his mansion for 6 hours. Didn't move, didn't beg, just stood, soaking wet, holding that key where the cameras could see it. And she waited. Because she understood something most people didn't, powerful men got bored easily, and boredom made them curious. Curiosity made them careless. By hour 4, guards were arguing about her. By hour 5, Phones were ringing inside. By hour 6, the gates opened. Not because they pitied her, because Vincent Romano wanted to know what kind of child stood in a storm for 6 hours, holding a key to something he'd forgotten existed. Now, she stood in his office, surrounded by men who'd killed for less than eye contact, facing a vault that had murdered 17 people, holding 3 words that might save her or bury her. She wasn't afraid anymore. Fear was for people who still believed the world owed them safety. Kira believed in exactly one thing. Marcus hadn't died for nothing. And she'd prove it, even if it killed her. Vincent Romano didn't become a king by accident. He was born into blood, raised on violence, baptized in fire. His father ran Chicago's underworld with an iron fist and a quick temper, the kind of man who'd break your jaw for looking at him wrong, then buy you dinner afterward if you survived. Vincent learned early. Power wasn't inherited. It was taken and defended every single day. At 15, he'd already killed his first man. Not out of rage or stupidity, out of necessity. His father's lieutenant had gotten ambitious, started making moves that smelled like betrayal. Vincent saw it 3 weeks before anyone else did. He didn't tell his father. He handled it himself. Quick, clean, no witnesses. When his father found out, he didn't punish Vincent. He promoted him. "You think like a king," his father said, the only compliment Vincent ever remembered. Kings don't wait for permission. By 25, Vincent controlled half the city. By 30, all of it. His father died of a heart attack, natural, the doctors said, though Vincent never confirmed or denied the rumors about what he'd slipped into the old man's evening whiskey. He didn't mourn. Mourning was weakness. He buried him with respect, then erased every trace of his father's outdated methods and rebuilt the empire smarter, colder, untouchable. Vincent didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. When he entered a room, conversations stopped. When he made a suggestion, it became law. When he smiled, people checked their backs for knives. He ruled through fear, yes, but also through something more dangerous: certainty. Everyone knew exactly where they stood with Vincent Romano. Loyal men lived well. Traitors died badly. There were no second chances, no forgiveness, no mercy. It made him predictable in the best way. People trusted his brutality because it was consistent. The vault in his office was part of that legend. 5 years ago, he'd commissioned it as a test. Not of security, he had plenty of that. A test of loyalty and intelligence. Inside sat $100 million in unmarked bills, payment from a deal so sensitive that even mentioning it could get you disappeared. He didn't need the money. He needed to know who among his men could be trusted with the combination, who was smart enough to crack it, who was desperate enough to try. So he made it a game. Open it, keep the money. Fail, and consequences followed. 17 men tried. Experts, safecrackers, engineers, former military specialists. Some lasted hours, some minutes. All of them failed. 3 died from the failsafes built into the mechanism, pressure-triggered needles laced with toxins Vincent never named. The others walked away, broken, humiliated, knowing they'd disappointed the one man in Chicago you never disappointed. Vincent kept the bloodstain on purpose. A reminder, the vault wasn't about money, it was about knowing your limits. He respected limits. His father never had, and it got him killed. Vincent knew when to push and when to wait, when to destroy and when to simply watch your enemies destroy themselves. He'd built an empire on patience. But patience required control, and control required eliminating variables. Which is why the girl standing in his office bothered him more than he'd ever admit. She was a variable he hadn't accounted for. A 10-year-old nobody with eyes that didn't flinch, hands that didn't shake, and a calm that felt older than her body. He'd seen soldiers break under less pressure than she was standing in right now. Grown men who wet themselves when his guards brought them to this room. Hardened criminals who begged before Vincent even asked a question. This child just stood there, watching, waiting, thinking. It annoyed him, intrigued him, worried him. Vincent Romano hadn't survived 30 years by ignoring instincts, and his instincts screamed that this girl was dangerous in ways he didn't understand yet. The key she carried didn't matter. He barely remembered what it opened, some old safety deposit box Marcus had used for side work, debts, and favors Vincent had written off years ago. But those 3 words, the debts paid, those mattered. Because Vincent Romano never forgot a debt. Every favor owed, every promise made, every threat issued, he tracked them all like ledgers in his mind. Marcus had owed him something once, something small, forgettable. The boy had worked it off months ago, died clean as far as Vincent's books were concerned. So why send his sister with a message about a debt already settled? Unless Marcus knew something, saw something, left something behind that Vincent had missed. And Vincent Romano hated missing things. He leaned back, studying the girl, running scenarios. She was bait or she was suicide. Either way, she was leverage. The question was, leverage for what? His men waited for orders. The vault hummed quietly, counting down to nothing. The rain battered windows that had seen more death than most morgues. And Vincent made a decision. He'd let her try. Not because he believed she'd succeed, but because failure would tell him what he needed to know: who sent her, what they wanted, and how much blood he'd need to spill to make the problem disappear. He gestured toward the vault, voice calm as winter. "Go ahead, little girl. Show me what you've got." The vault sat like a silent judge, 10 feet tall and 4 feet wide, brushed titanium surface gleaming under fluorescent lights that made everything look surgical and cold. Kira stepped closer. Each footfall echoed in the vast office, swallowed by walls lined with dark wood and darker secrets. Vincent's men shifted, hands drifting toward weapons they wore like jewelry. She felt their eyes tracking her, waiting for fear, for hesitation, for the moment she'd realized she'd walked into her own execution. She gave them nothing. Up close, the vault was beautiful in a terrible way. No manufacturer's logo, no brand name custom built, probably by someone who didn't survive long after finishing it. The combination dial sat in the center, surrounded by a digital panel she didn't recognize and pressure sensors she absolutely did. 17 corpses. The number rolled through her mind like a death toll bell. She'd seen the photos online after searching Vincent's name. News articles buried on page 6, police reports that barely tried to hide the truth. Men found dead in their homes, in their cars, in hotel rooms they'd never checked into. All of them had tried this vault. All of them had failed. The mechanisms were layered, she could tell that much. Mechanical combination lock paired with digital encryption, backed by something chemical or biological that triggered if you pushed wrong. This wasn't a safe. It was a trap, pretending to be a test. Behind her, Vincent's voice cut through the silence. Previous attempts had advantages you don't. Engineers with degrees, criminals with decades of experience, one man who claimed he'd cracked NATO bunkers. He let that hang in the air, heavy with implication. They all had time, tools, knowledge. You have nothing. Kira didn't turn around, kept her eyes on the vault, studying, thinking, calculating angles most people never saw. "I have what they didn't," she said quietly. "And what's that?" Nothing left to lose. The room went silent, except for rain, drumming glass somewhere behind her. Vincent's men exchanged glances. One of them, a man with scars crossing his throat like a necklace, laughed, low and mean. "Boss, this is a waste of time. Let me handle the girl. We'll find out who really sent her." "No." Vincent's voice didn't rise, but the man went pale and stepped back immediately. "I want to see what she does." Kira tuned them out, focused on the vault. Marcus had taught her something most people never learned. Complex problems usually had simple solutions hidden inside them. The trick was seeing past the complexity to find the pattern underneath. She knelt, examining the base of the vault where it met the floor, ran her fingers along the seam, feeling for vibrations, temperature changes, anything that would tell her what she was dealing with. The metal was cold, but not freezing. No ventilation gaps she could detect. The seal was tight enough to make her ears pop when she pressed close. Airtight, which meant the toxin releases were probably internal, triggered by wrong combinations that would flood the sealed chamber with gas before anyone could escape. Smart, cruel, exactly what she'd expect from a man who viewed murder as mathematics. She stood, moved to the combination dial. Brass, worn smooth by attempts that had failed. 17 sets of hands had touched this, desperate and dying. Their ghosts didn't scare her. The dead couldn't hurt anyone. You planning to stand there all night? Vincent's voice carried amusement now, like he was watching entertainment he'd paid for. I'm thinking. Thinking gets you killed in my world. Good thing I'm not in your world yet. She heard him shift in his chair, could feel his attention sharpening, reassessing. She'd surprised him. Small victory, but she'd take it. The combination dial had 80 numbers, 0 to 79, standard. But the sequence required could be anywhere from 3 numbers to 10, with clockwise and counterclockwise rotations mattering. Mathematically, that was millions of possible combinations. No one solved that by guessing. You needed the code or you needed to understand the person who'd set it. Kira closed her eyes, thought about Vincent Romano. What kind of man commissioned a vault designed to kill? What would that man consider meaningful enough to lock away? Not sentimentality. Men like Vincent didn't have sentimental bones in their bodies. Not randomness either. Random combinations were for people afraid of patterns. Vincent struck her as someone who believed in patterns, in systems, in control. So the combination would mean something. Not to the world, to him. She opened her eyes, turned to face him directly for the first time since entering the room. When were you born? His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Excuse me? Your birthday. What is it? The scarred man moved forward, hand on his gun. Watch your mouth, girl. Vincent raised one finger. The man froze mid-step. Why would I tell you that? Vincent asked, voice soft, dangerous. Because if you don't, I'll guess. And if I guess wrong too many times, your vault kills me. You lose whatever leverage you think I represent. And you never find out what Marcus really left you. The silence that followed felt like holding your breath underwater. Then Vincent smiled. Actually smiled. And somehow that was more terrifying than anything else he'd done. August 7th, 1973. Kira turned back to the vault, mind racing. August 8th month, 7th day, 1973. The 7th of August, 2073. Too obvious. Vincent wouldn't use his actual birthday, but he might use it as a foundation, twist it into something less obvious. Reverse it. 7378. Still too simple. What if you treated each number as part of a sequence? 8 plus 7 equals 15. 7 plus 3 equals 10. 7 minus 3 equals 4. 15104. She reached for the dial, then stopped. 17 corpses. 17 people who'd tried and died. What if the number 17 was part of this? A warning or a clue hidden in plain sight? Her hand trembled for the first time, not from fear, from the weight of realization. Marcus had worked for Vincent, had access to information most people died for knowing. If he'd discovered the combination, if he'd left it for her somehow. She pulled out the key he'd given her. Small, brass, old-fashioned. The kind that opens safety deposit boxes or lockers, not high-tech vaults. But engraved on it, barely visible, were scratches. Not random, deliberate. Numbers someone had carved with a pin or needle, trying to leave a message that wouldn't be obvious. 170873. 17. August. 73. The year Vincent was born, but starting with 17, the number of people who died trying. It wasn't a combination. It was a warning and a key, telling her that 17 attempts had failed because they'd tried the obvious. What you needed was the inverse, the opposite. If Vincent's birthday was the 7th of August 2073, and 17 people died trying it forward and backward. You needed the numbers he'd never use, the ones that meant nothing to him personally, but everything mathematically. She started turning the dial. Right to 62, the opposite of his birth month. Left to 24, the inverse of his birthday. Right to 46, the year 73 reversed and inverted. Click. The sound was tiny, almost inaudible, but in that silent room it rang like a bell. Vincent sat forward. His men tensed, fingers on triggers, waiting for the girl to collapse from poison gas or hidden needles. Kira kept going. The digital panel lit up, requesting a secondary code. She looked at the key again. On the back, more scratches. Letters this time, not numbers. DEBT. Debt, the word Marcus had told her to say. She entered it on the panel. D3, E5, B2, T20. Another click. Deeper this time, mechanical and final. The vault door trembled. Pressure seals hissed as they released air that hadn't moved in 5 years. And then, slowly, impossibly, the door swung open. Inside, stacks of cash gleamed under harsh light. $100 million, just like Vincent had promised. But Kira didn't look at the money. She looked at what sat on top of it, a single envelope with her brother's handwriting on the front. For Kira, I'm sorry I couldn't stay. Her hands shook as she reached for it. Behind her, Vincent Romano stood from his chair for the first time since she'd entered. His shadow fell across her like a sentence waiting to be pronounced. Well, he said quietly, voice carrying something she couldn't identify. Respect? Fear? Rage? Looks like Marcus trained you better than I thought. Kira turned, envelope clutched to her chest, tears she'd been holding for 3 days, finally breaking free. The debt's paid, she whispered, the words Marcus had died to make sure she'd deliver. Vincent stared at her, then at the open vault, then back at her. And for the first time in 20 years, Vincent Romano didn't know what to do next. If you're still watching, drop a comment. What would you do if you were Kira right now? Take the money and run, or stay and find out what Marcus really died for. And if this story is keeping you hooked, subscribe before the next twist catches you off guard. Only those who stay till the end will understand what that envelope really contains. Vincent didn't move, didn't speak, just watched as Kira stood frozen, Marcus's envelope pressed against her chest like armor that might stop bullets if she believed hard enough. His men waited for orders. Kill her, take the money, close this problem before it grew teeth. But Vincent raised one hand, palm out, and they stayed frozen in place like statues waiting for permission to breathe. Open it, he said. Kira's fingers trembled on the envelope. She didn't trust her voice, didn't trust her hands, didn't trust anything in this room that smelled like expensive cologne and old violence. But she trusted Marcus. Even dead, even gone, she trusted him more than anything living. She tore the envelope open. Inside, a single piece of paper. Marcus's handwriting cramped and rushed, like he'd written it knowing time was running out. Kira, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you the way I promised. I'm sorry I got involved with people I couldn't outsmart. I'm sorry for everything. But I'm not sorry for this. I hid something in that vault 5 years ago. Something Vincent doesn't know about. Something that proves his second-in-command has been stealing from him for years. Ledgers, recordings, evidence that could burn his entire empire. I found it by accident. Kept it as insurance. Never thought I'd need to use it. If you made it this far, you're smarter than me, braver than me, everything I hoped you'd be. The evidence is taped under the bottom shelf, left side. Take it. Use it. Bargain with it if you have to. But whatever you do, survive. I love you, little sister. I always will. Kira read it twice, then a third time, because the words didn't make sense and made perfect sense simultaneously. Marcus hadn't just sent her to open a vault. He'd sent her to detonate a bomb. She looked up at Vincent, whose expression had shifted from amused curiosity to something colder, sharper, predatory. What does it say? His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Kira folded the letter carefully, slid it into her pocket, met his eyes without blinking. It says my brother loved me. And nothing else that matters to you. The scarred man moved forward again, reaching for her, but Vincent's voice cracked like a whip. Touch her, and I'll remove your hands. Everyone froze. Vincent stood slowly, circled his desk, approached Kira with the careful precision of someone approaching a wild animal that might bolt or bite. He knelt in front of her, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his temples, the exhaustion that lived behind the power. You're lying, he said quietly. And you're very good at it, but I've been lied to by professionals, Kira. I know what it looks like. She didn't respond, couldn't. Her heart hammered so loud, she was certain he could hear it. Your brother left you something in that vault, something he thought was valuable enough to risk your life for. Vincent tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was 3 moves from solving. The question is, do you take it, or do you tell me what it is and maybe walk out of here alive? Kira's mind raced through scenarios, calculating survival odds the way Marcus had taught her. Option 1. Tell the truth. Vincent finds the evidence, kills whoever betrayed him, maybe kills her too for knowing about it. Option 2. Lie convincingly. Grab the evidence. Run. Hope she makes it to the door before bullets find her spine. Option 3. Something else. Something Marcus would have done. She chose option 3. I'll make you a deal. Vincent's eyebrows rose. You'll make me a deal? Yes. The room erupted in laughter. His men couldn't help themselves. The absurdity too much. A 10-year-old girl negotiating with Vincent Romano like she had leverage, like she had power, like she wasn't seconds from disappearing into the Chicago River. But Vincent didn't laugh. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. I'm listening. 6 months earlier, Marcus sat with Kira in their shelter bunk, teaching her chess with a board he'd stolen from a donation bin. The pieces were mismatched, a bottle cap for a bishop, an eraser for a rook, but the strategy was real. See, the queen's powerful, right? Marcus moved the makeshift piece across the board. But power doesn't mean invincible. You sacrifice the queen if it means winning the game. Kira frowned. Why would you sacrifice your best piece? Because winning isn't about keeping everything safe. It's about knowing what you can afford to lose. He tapped the board. The king's what matters. Protect the king. Sacrifice everything else if you have to. What if you can't protect the king? Marcus smiled, sad and tired. Then you make sure whoever takes him down pays for it. Present. Kira's voice was steady when she spoke. Whatever Marcus left in that vault, it's yours. I don't want it. I don't even want the money. She gestured at the stacks of cash behind her without looking. I want one thing. Which is information. You tell me who killed my brother and why. You give me names, locations, everything. Then I walk away and you never see me again. Vincent studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, paced to the window, watched rain streak glass that had witnessed more confessions than most churches. Your brother died because he saw something he shouldn't have, got involved in business that wasn't his, made enemies who don't forgive curiosity. You killed him. No. Vincent turned, and for the first time, Kira saw something almost like honesty in his face. But I know who did, and I know why. Tell me. First, show me what's in the vault. Kira hesitated. This was the moment: commit or run. Trust or die trying. She turned back to the open vault, reached inside, felt along the bottom shelf where Marcus said the evidence would be. Her fingers found tape, old, brittle, barely holding. She pulled, and a manila envelope came free, thicker than the letter, heavier with secrets. She didn't open it, handed it directly to Vincent. He took it, examined the seal, then ripped it open with the casual violence of someone who'd opened envelopes full of death threats before breakfast. Inside, ledgers, photographs, USB drives, bank statements with numbers that made even Vincent's expression flicker. His jaw tightened. Muscles in his neck went rigid. How long did Marcus have this? I don't know. How long? Louder now, anger bleeding through control. I don't know. Kira stood her ground. He never told me. Just said if anything happened to him, I should bring it to you. Vincent flipped through pages, face darkening with each one. Then he stopped on a photograph, a man Kira didn't recognize, standing with someone who looked familiar from news reports, politicians, judges, people who weren't supposed to be in rooms with people like Vincent. Your brother, Vincent said slowly, just saved my life, and possibly my entire organization. He looked at Kira with something new in his eyes. Not kindness, Vincent Romano didn't do kindness, but respect, recognition, the acknowledgement that she'd walked into hell and come out holding leverage. The man who killed Marcus is named Dominic Saviano, my second in command, my oldest friend. Vincent's voice was ice forming over deep water, or so I thought. Kira felt the room shift, felt pieces clicking into place. Marcus found out Dominic was stealing from you. Stealing, lying, making deals with people who want me dead. Vincent closed the envelope carefully, and when Marcus discovered it, Dominic had him eliminated before he could talk. Why didn't Marcus just tell you? Because Dominic is smart. He would have killed Marcus the moment he suspected anything. So your brother did the only thing he could. He hid the evidence and trusted that someday someone would find it. Vincent looked at her. He trusted you. The weight of that landed like a physical blow. Marcus had known, had planned for this, had died believing his little sister was smart enough, brave enough, strong enough to finish what he started. Kira's throat closed. Tears threatened again, but she forced them down. Tears were for later, for when she was alone and safe and could afford to break. Right now, she needed to be steel. Where's Dominic? Vincent smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Kira had ever seen. That's the beautiful part. He's downstairs, waiting to find out what happened to the girl who tried to open my vault. Flashback. 2 years earlier. Marcus came home with a black eye and split knuckles. Kira was 8, small enough that fear still looked like tears. What happened? Nothing. Marcus washed his hands in the sink, blood swirling down the drain like watercolor. Liar. He smiled despite the pain. You're too smart for your own good. You know that? You always say being smart keeps you alive. Yeah, well, he sat beside her, wincing. Sometimes being smart means knowing when to fight and when to walk away. I didn't walk away fast enough. Did you win? Doesn't matter. What matters is I'm still here. He pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her forehead. And I'll always come back to you, no matter what. You understand? She nodded against his chest. Promise me something, Kira. If I ever don't come back, if something happens and I can't protect you anymore, promise me you'll be smarter than I was. Promise me you'll survive. I promise. He held her tighter. That's my girl. Present. Vincent made a phone call. 3 words. Send Dominic up. Then he turned to Kira, expression unreadable. When he walks through that door, you stay silent. You stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. Understood? Why are you protecting me? I'm not. Vincent checked his gun, chambered around with practiced efficiency. I'm protecting my investment. Your brother gave me something valuable. That makes you valuable, until I decide otherwise. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy, confident, unafraid. The door opened. Dominic Saviano walked in tall, broad-shouldered, expensive suit that screamed wealth and violence in equal measure. He stopped when he saw the open vault, the scattered evidence, Kira standing in the center of it all like the eye of a hurricane. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, he said smoothly, looks like the little girl had more skills than we expected. Vincent moved between them, Casual but deliberate. She did. Opened it faster than anyone thought possible. He gestured at the evidence on his desk. Found some interesting things inside, too. Dominic's expression flickered just for a second, a micro-expression of pure panic before control slammed back into place. But Kira saw it, and so did Vincent. Interesting how? Dominic asked carefully. Interesting, like my oldest friend has been robbing me blind for 5 years. Interesting, like the boy who died last week discovered it and paid with his life. Interesting, like I should have seen this coming but trusted the wrong person. The room went silent, except for rain and breathing and the electric hum of violence about to erupt. Dominic's hand moved toward his jacket. Vincent's gun was already out, aimed, finger on the trigger. Don't. Dominic froze, looked at Vincent, then at Kira, then back at Vincent. You're really gonna believe some street kid over me after everything we've built? I believe evidence. I believe numbers. I believe blood. Vincent's voice was colder than Kira had heard yet. And right now, all three say you're a dead man walking. What happened next was over in seconds. Dominic lunged. Vincent fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a thunderclap that made Kira's ears ring. Dominic hit the floor, red spreading across expensive fabric, eyes wide with shock and fading life. Vincent stood over him, gun still raised, making sure. Then he looked at Kira, whose face had gone pale but whose eyes stayed clear and focused. You still want those names? He asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Then listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. And Vincent Romano, the man who'd killed his oldest friend without hesitation, told her everything. Some of you might think Kira should have run the moment that vault opened. Comment below, would you have stayed or bolted? And if you think this story can't get more intense, you're wrong. Subscribe now, because what happens when Kira learns the full truth about her brother's death will change everything you thought you knew. The names Vincent gave her were poison. 3 men, 2 politicians, 1 judge, all of them complicit in Marcus's death, all of them profiting from Dominic's betrayal, all of them protected by power that made them untouchable. Or so they thought. Kira memorized every word, every detail, every address, habit, vulnerability. Vincent mentioned with the clinical precision of someone who'd made a career of knowing exactly how to destroy people. Why are you telling me this? She asked when he finished. Vincent holstered his gun, stepped over Dominic's body like it was furniture. Because your brother did me a favor, and I always pay my debts. This isn't payment. This is ammunition. Yes. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, didn't offer her any. What you do with it is your choice. But understand something, Kira, the moment you walk out that door with those names, you become a threat to powerful people. They'll come for you. They'll use everything they have to make you disappear. Let them try. Vincent smiled, genuinely amused. You sound like your brother. Good. He drank, studying her over the rim of his glass. You're not afraid, are you? Not of me, not of them, not of any of this. I was afraid, Kira said quietly. 3 days ago, I was terrified. But fear's just another emotion. You feel it, acknowledge it, then decide if it's useful or not. And yours wasn't? No. Being afraid of you wouldn't have opened that vault. Being afraid of dying wouldn't have gotten me answers. She met his eyes. So I stopped being afraid and started being useful instead. Vincent set down his glass, moved closer. Not threatening considering, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. How old are you? 10. 10. He shook his head slowly. When I was 10, I was still figuring out how to throw a punch. You just negotiated yourself out of an execution and weaponized information that could topple government officials. My brother taught me well. Clearly. Vincent turned toward the window, hands behind his back, voice thoughtful. You know what the hardest part of power is, Kira? It's not getting it. It's knowing who to trust once you have it. She didn't respond. sensed he wasn't really talking to her anymore. Dominic was my brother in everything but blood. We built this empire together, survived wars, betrayals, investigations that should have buried us both. I trusted him with my life. He glanced at the body cooling on his floor. And he sold me out for what? Money I would have given him if he'd asked? Alliances with people who'll discard him the moment he's no longer useful? Maybe he wanted what you had. Power? Freedom. Kira moved to stand beside him, looking out at the city sprawled below like a circuit board of lights and possibility. You make your own choices. He had to follow yours. Maybe he got tired of it. Vincent looked at her, something almost like pain crossing his features before vanishing. You're too young to understand this world. Maybe, but I understand survival, and I understand that the people who hurt my brother thought they were untouchable. She turned to face him fully. They're not. Nothing is. For a long moment, Vincent said nothing, just studied her with those cold, calculating eyes that had sentenced so many people to death they'd lost count. Then he did something Kira never expected. He knelt, brought himself to her level, not as a gesture of submission, but of recognition. Your brother asked me once why I did this, why I built an empire on violence when I could have walked away, lived quietly, died peacefully. Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. I told him that some men are born to build, others are born to burn, and I've never been good at building. What about me? Kira asked. What was I born to do? Vincent reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand rested on her shoulder, heavy with years of blood she couldn't see but could feel. You, he said quietly, were born to survive everything people like me create. And maybe to build something better from the ashes. He stood, moved to his desk, pulled out an envelope thick with cash, handed it to her. 50,000, enough to disappear, start over, become someone new. Kira stared at it. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. You earned it. Vincent's expression was unreadable. And when those men come looking for you, and they will, you'll need resources. Money buys safety. Safety buys time. Time buys options. She took the envelope, felt its weight. Freedom and danger in equal measure. What happens to Dominic? He never existed. By morning, there'll be no body, no evidence, no memory, just another name in a city that forgets people before they're cold. Kira looked at the corpse one last time, felt nothing. No satisfaction, no horror, just the numb acknowledgement that this was justice in the world Marcus had lived in. Can I ask you something? You've earned that right. If Marcus had come to you directly, if he'd told you what Dominic was doing, would you have protected him? Vincent was silent for a long time, long enough that Kira thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes, but he didn't trust me enough to try, and that failure, that's on me. It wasn't an apology. Vincent Romano didn't apologize, but it was acknowledgement, responsibility, the closest thing to regret she'd ever heard from him. I need to go, Kira said. You do. Vincent moved to the door, opened it. His men waited outside, confused by the sounds they'd heard, the gunshot, the silence that followed. Vincent gestured, and they parted like water. Escort her out. Anyone touches her answers to me. They nodded, faces carefully blank. Kira walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. The money in the vault, the 100 million. What happens to it? Vincent smiled, sharp and cold. Consider it a memorial fund for everyone who died trying to open it. He paused. Including your brother. She nodded. It wasn't closure. Nothing would ever close the wound Marcus's death had opened. But it was something. Recognition. Respect. She walked toward the door. Marcus's letter in one pocket, $50,000 in the other, and 3 names burned into her memory like brands. Behind her, Vincent called out one last time. Kira, if you're smart, you'll take that money and disappear. Change your name. Leave the city. Forget everything you learned tonight. She paused in the doorway. "And if I'm not smart? Then I'll see you again, and next time, we'll be on opposite sides of something much worse than a vault." She met his eyes one final time. "I'll take my chances." And she walked out of Vincent Romano's life into rain that washed nothing clean but promised everything was about to change. The streets of Chicago swallowed her whole. Kira walked through rain that turned gutters into rivers. Her shoes still held together with tape splashing through puddles that reflected neon and headlights and the distorted face of a girl who just survived something that should have killed her. She didn't go back to the shelter. Couldn't. The women there would ask questions she couldn't answer, show concern that would feel like pity, offer help she no longer needed. Instead, she found herself at the one place that still felt like Marcus, the public library on 52nd, open late on Thursdays. Filled with homeless people pretending to read, and students actually studying, and staff who'd stopped caring, who came in as long as they didn't cause problems. She claimed a corner table in the back, near the bathrooms where no cameras reached, and finally let herself breathe. The envelope of cash sat heavy in her jacket. $50,000. A fortune. A future. A target on her back the moment anyone found out. She spread Marcus's letter on the table, read it again under fluorescent lights that made everything look sickly and surreal. "Survive," he'd written. As if it was that simple. As if survival was just a choice you made and not a battle you fought every single day against a world designed to crush people like them. But then again, she'd survived tonight. Walked into a room where 17 people had died and walked out alive. Wealthy, armed with information powerful enough to destroy careers. Maybe survival was simpler than she'd thought. Maybe it was just refusing to die when death seemed inevitable. She pulled out her phone, a cracked thing Marcus had bought her from a pawn shop. Barely functional, but enough for what she needed. 3 names. 2 politicians. 1 judge. She started researching. The first politician, Councilman Richard Hayes, had a clean record publicly. Championed education reform, youth programs, community investment. The kind of man who smiled for cameras and shook hands at fundraisers and got reelected every term without serious opposition. But Vincent's information painted a different picture. Offshore accounts, payments from shell companies, meetings with known criminals documented in photographs Marcus had somehow obtained before dying. Hayes had taken money from Dominic, had helped cover up Marcus's murder, had signed off on things that kept Vincent's empire running smoothly while publicly campaigning against organized crime. The second politician, State Senator Patricia Morgan, was cleaner, but not by much. She'd accepted campaign donations from front companies, pushed legislation that benefited Vincent's interests, looked the other way when investigations got too close. And the judge, Honorable Gerald Foster, was the linchpin. He'd dismissed cases, suppressed evidence, sentenced people who threatened the organization while letting Vincent's people walk. All 3 had blood on their hands, Marcus's blood specifically. Kira stared at their faces on her phone screen, smiling. Professional, powerful people who thought they were untouchable because they wore suits instead of carrying guns. They'd learn differently. But not tonight. Tonight, she was still a 10-year-old girl with no resources beyond cash and information. Taking on politicians required planning, patience, strategy. She closed her phone, leaned back in the uncomfortable library chair, and felt the exhaustion hit all at once. Her body wanted sleep. Her mind wanted answers. Her heart wanted Marcus back, wanted to rewind time to before he got involved with people who killed for profit, wanted a childhood she'd never had and would never get. But wanting didn't change reality. Marcus was gone. She was alone. And the only way forward was through people who destroyed her family without losing a single night's sleep. A librarian passed by, gave her a sympathetic look. "You okay, honey?" Kira nodded, not trusting her voice. "Library closes in 30 minutes. "I know, thank you." The woman moved on, and Kira was alone again with ghosts and choices, and a future that felt simultaneously impossible and inevitable. She thought about Vincent's offer. Take the money, disappear, start over somewhere new, become someone else. Let Marcus's death fade into just another statistic in a city that produced them daily. It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice Marcus had died trying to give her. But it wasn't the choice she wanted. She wanted justice. Wanted the people who'd killed her brother to know his name, to understand what they'd taken, to pay for it in ways that money couldn't fix. She wanted them to feel what she felt: powerless, afraid, alone. And she knew, sitting in that library, surrounded by books full of stories about heroes and villains and the thin line between them, that she was going to make it happen. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. Because Marcus had taught her one final lesson without meaning to. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most power. It's the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Kira gathered her things, left the library, walked into rain that had finally started to ease. Somewhere in this city, 3 people slept soundly, convinced they were safe. They weren't. And before this was over, they'd know exactly why. If you've made it this far, you're invested. Comment justice if you think Kira should go after them, or mercy if she should walk away. And here's the truth. What she does next will determine not just her future, but whether Marcus's death meant something or nothing. Subscribe, because this story isn't over. It's just beginning. 3 months later, Kira was a different person. Not in the ways that mattered. She was still scared sometimes. Still missed Marcus so badly it felt like drowning. Still woke up reaching for a brother who'd never answer again. But on the outside, she'd transformed. The money Vincent gave her bought things poverty had never allowed. Clean clothes, decent shoes, a room in a boarding house run by a woman who asked no questions as long as rent appeared on time. She'd enrolled in school under a new name, Elena Vasquez, and played the role of a quiet transfer student whose family had moved for work. Teachers liked her because she never caused problems. Students ignored her because she didn't seek attention. Perfect camouflage for what she was really doing. The evidence Marcus left behind wasn't just ledgers and photographs. It was a roadmap. A detailed accounting of every transaction, every meeting, every crime committed by people who thought they were too powerful to fall. Kira had spent 3 months studying that roadmap, learning the patterns, understanding the system, finding the cracks where light got through. She'd started small, anonymous tips to journalists known for investigating corruption, leaked documents to watchdog organizations, digital breadcrumbs leading back to offshore accounts and shell companies. Nothing traceable to her, nothing that would draw attention to a 10-year-old girl who shouldn't know these things existed. But enough to start asking questions. Councilman Hayes found himself under investigation for campaign finance violations. Minor, at first easily explained, probably survivable. Until the second leak, and the third, and the documents that couldn't be explained away. Senator Morgan's donors started getting subpoenaed, her legislation scrutinized, her connections to known criminals examined by people who couldn't be bought or scared off. Judge Foster was the hardest. Judges had protections, immunities, colleagues who defended them reflexively. But even judges could be exposed, especially when their own court recordings mysteriously obtained and anonymously released showed bias so blatant it couldn't be ignored. Kira watched it unfold from a distance, from library computers and borrowed phones and careful anonymity. She wasn't naive. She knew this wouldn't bring Marcus back. Knew that even if all 3 went to prison, it wouldn't fill the hole his absence had carved in her chest. But it meant something. Had to mean something. Because if his death was meaningless, if it was just random violence in a city that produced it like factories produce smoke, then what was the point of any of this? So she chose to believe it mattered. Chose to make it matter. And slowly, piece by piece, the empire that had killed her brother began to crack. Not collapse. Vincent was too smart, too entrenched for that, but crack enough that people noticed, enough that other victims found courage, enough that the illusion of invincibility shattered. One evening, Kira sat in her boarding house room, homework spread across a desk she'd never owned before, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. had learned to be cautious about unexpected calls. But something made her pick up. "Hello? You've been busy." Vincent's voice, unmistakable even through digital compression. Her heart stopped. "How did you get this number?" "Please. I've known where you were since the day you left my office. Did you really think I'd let someone with that much leverage just vanish? Are you going to kill me? If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead." He sounded almost amused. "No, I'm calling because what you're doing, it's smart. Surgical. The kind of revenge that actually works. It's not revenge. It's justice. Call it whatever helps you sleep, but understand something. Elena, or should I say Kira, you've started something you can't stop. Those men you're targeting, they have friends, resources. The more you expose, the harder they'll look for who's doing it. Let them look. They'll find you eventually, and when they do, I won't be able to protect you." "I never asked for protection." Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "Your brother would be proud of you." The words hit harder than any threat could have. "I have to go," Kira whispered. "One more thing. The vault, the 100 million. I donated it. Youth programs, shelters, education funds. Places that help kids like you and Marcus." A pause. Seemed appropriate. The line went dead before she could respond. Kira sat in the silence of her small room, phone in hand, tears finally coming after months of holding them back. Marcus was gone. That would never change. But his death had bought something. Evidence that toppled powerful people. Money that helped kids who needed it. A sister who survived when she shouldn't have, and turned that survival into something that mattered. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was something. And sometimes, something was all you could hope for. 5 years later, Kira graduated high school early, full scholarship to university. Degrees in political science and criminal justice already planned. She kept Marcus's letter in a frame on her wall. Read it every morning before starting her day. The 3 names she'd memorized that night in Vincent's office, all 3 had faced consequences. Hayes lost his council seat, currently fighting federal charges. Morgan resigned under pressure. Reputation destroyed. Foster was disbarred. Pension revoked. Legacy ruined. Not prison, powerful people rarely saw cells, but destroyed nonetheless. Careers ended. Names synonymous with corruption. Futures erased. It wasn't the justice Kira had wanted, but it was the justice the world allowed. She never saw Vincent Romano again. Heard through news reports that he'd stepped back from active leadership, let younger, hungrier people take over while he disappeared into legitimate businesses and quiet retirement. Whether he'd changed or just gotten better at hiding, she didn't know, didn't care. Her war had never been with him. Sometimes, late at night when assignments were finished and the boarding house quiet, Kira would think about that vault. About 17 corpses and $100 million and a safe designed to kill anyone who tried. She'd cracked it not because she was smarter than everyone else, but because she'd understood something they hadn't. The combination wasn't about intelligence. It was about understanding what mattered to the person who built it. And what mattered to Vincent Romano, what had always mattered, was loyalty, trust, the belief that the people closest to you wouldn't betray you. Dominic's betrayal had been the real code to crack. Once she understood that, everything else fell into place. Marcus had known, had left her the key not to the vault, but to understanding the man who controlled it. That was the real gift he'd given her, the ability to see past the obvious to the truth underneath. She used it now in everything, saw patterns in political campaigns, contradictions in policies, vulnerabilities in systems designed to seem impenetrable. And she was just getting started. Because the world was full of vaults, full of people who thought they were untouchable, problems that seemed impossible, injustices that appeared permanent. But nothing was permanent. Everything had a code. And Kira had learned from the best teacher possible, a brother who died making sure she'd survive. She looked at his letter one more time before turning off the light. "Survive," he'd written. She had. She was. She would. But more than that, she'd do what Marcus never got the chance to. She'd take everything they'd survived and build something that mattered. Not an empire, not power, something better, something worth the price they'd paid. What would you have done with those three names? Pursued justice like Kira, or taken the money and disappeared? Comment below and tell us your truth. And if this story made you feel something, anger, hope, grief, determination, then you understand why we tell these stories. They're not just entertainment. They're reminders that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to accept the world as it is. Subscribe so you never miss the next story, because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in front of their own impossible vault. And maybe, just maybe, our stories will give them the courage to crack it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for believing that broken things can still be beautiful.